thing happens with a fly. A fly has a different kind of eyes, all made up of all these different facets. And then when they look through it, it's the same thing. You're seeing all of these different parts of something reflecting through different facets. And they distinguish which one of these they want to focus on. And that is the one they look through and concentrate on, I guess you would say. Well, to me, this is fascinating to find that this is the way animals operate. And I think this would be valuable to anthropologists, to those who study animals, scientists, because I don't think anyone really wanted to know how do animals see, how do they perceive. I had an interesting one just about a month or so ago. For the woman, when we first went into the past life, all of this happens spontaneously. You never know where anybody's going to go. I take them back to the most appropriate lifetime for them to experience as relating to problems in this lifetime. So I have no idea where they're going to go. Even if you were going to lead someone, how in the world could you lead them to this kind of a life? But just a few weeks ago, this woman, when she went into the life, she was on a leaf on a tree. And I'm always asking questions like, okay, now, what is this? You don't just say, oh, this is crazy. They're not a person. They're not in the physical body. I want to know, well, what are you experiencing? Well, as she was talking, the leaf fell off the tree and fell into a stream that was flowing at the bottom of the tree. And she's on this leaf. Then she suddenly figured out what she was, and she said, oh my gosh, I'm a worm. I'm a little yellow worm, and I'm floating on this leaf. And she said, I don't have any arms. There's nothing I can do. I can't help myself. All I have is these little stubby legs. And as the leaf floated down the stream, she began to get scared because she says, what if a bird comes along and eats me? And as she rode the stream, and you imagine what that would have been like, even if something that tiny, it would be the equivalent of being on a boat, being tossed back and forth across rapids or something. But to her, it was the same sensation, only it was on a tiny little worm on a leaf. And she said, I was just having a good time eating the leaf. But she said, I picked the wrong leaf because it fell off, and here I am in the water. And we went through the whole story to where she almost capsized and almost went off in the water. And finally, she came to the edge of the shore where she was able to crawl up onto the bank. But it was all of these things were trying to teach something. This is why I'm going to have a whole chapter on non-human bodies in the next book that I write. But here was someone who was just a little worm. But I've had people be animals. I've had them be wolves. I've had them be all kinds of things. I had one be a giant bird, which must have been like a dinosaur. And she's in dinosaur times, I guess you would say. It was a big, giant bird, and she was very protective of her eggs she had just laid because she said there aren't many of us left. We have to protect the ones that we have because they're just like a dying species. And I had another one who went to a lifetime where she was a mammoth, those huge animals that look like elephants. She was a mammoth. All she could sense was that her body was so big and huge. And when she would try to walk, her legs were just so heavy and big. And it was this feeling of weight. So they were actually experiencing what it would be like to be these different species, different animals. And I had went to a life where he was a monkey. I don't know if it was baboons or what it was, baboons or gorillas, but they had like a clan to where they had a main, what would you say, chief, I guess, the main monkey who was the head of the whole group of monkeys. And it was a very pleasant life. They're swinging around in the trees, eating bananas, enjoying themselves, until one day something happened to this main monkey, the one that they depended on. And he died, and he was laying there on the ground. And the other ones are coming over and nudging him and getting him, trying to say, well, why don't you get up? They couldn't understand that he was gone, that he was dead. And it was like panic for a while, like, what do we do now? He's the one that took care of us and told us what to do. So we were seeing all of these things from the eyes of these simple creatures, but that was all they could handle at that time. And all that, the lesson had to be a very simple lesson as they progressed through these things. I have not found anyone ever going backwards on this ladder of life. I suppose it's possible. I know some religions believe that you come back as an animal. I've not found that, because I found once you get through the animal part, there's no reason to have to go back to that again. If you learn it, definitely don't want to regress. You want to go forward and go up the ladder, not backwards. But I suppose it could happen if there was a reason, if there was something they needed to learn. It has been suggested, suppose someone was very cruel to animals. Maybe they would have to regress to be an animal to see the other side of it. So I suppose anything is possible, but I'm going by the rules that I have found in my work. I found some very interesting ones where people were sea creatures. In fact, I just had one this week where someone went back to where they were a sea creature. And none of this surprises me anymore. A lot of hypnotists say they've never had anyone have a non-human body. But maybe they don't do as many people as I do, have as many clients, there's many different cases. And when I'm teaching my classes, I bring this up about non-human bodies. And some of the people say, the hypnotists, even though they've been doing it for many years, that I've never had anyone go to a lifetime other than being in a physical body. I've had many, many. Some of them are the most fascinating are these sea creatures. The one I just did this last week said she was coming into the life and she was coming down on the ocean. And I was thinking, well, she's probably going to come into a ship or a boat and be a sailor or something like that in the past life. Instead, she kept on coming down until she went through the water and was underneath the water. So I was thinking, well, this definitely doesn't sound like a sailor in a boat unless we'd come in on the last day of their life and they're drowning. Like I said, anything is possible with this kind of work. But I wanted to know about her body. And she said, well, I see fins. I'm not sure if I'm a fish or if I'm a seal or something like that. So, well, one way to find out, I wanted to know if she was under the water, could she breathe under the water? She said, yes, but only for a limited time. Then I have to come to the top of the water, which meant that she would have been a mammal of some kind. Turned out that she was a whale, but she was not a very big whale, a small whale. And she was enjoying herself swimming around, eating fish, no cares in the world. And she saw a boat. She didn't know what a boat was. It was the first one she had ever seen. And first she saw it from the underneath side of the boat, out of curiosity. I think it must have been a small boat that had come from a larger boat that sailed, that were in the distance. It was a smaller boat. But as she swam out from under the boat, she was looking at it, and there were men in the boat. And suddenly she had this fear that there was danger. and she needed to get out of there, even though she didn't have any idea what this thing was. So as she was swimming away from it, they must have seen her. And at that time, the best she could describe it was that they heard her, and she said they stabbed her. Well, sometimes they only use the words that they can find when you're in this type of life of personality or body. I assumed it was probably harpooned, but she was crying, and she said, "Why did they hurt me? Why did they do that? I wasn't bothering anyone. I was just swimming around. I haven't done anything to anyone. Why did they hurt me?" So then they tied ropes to her and tied her to the side of the boat and took her back to the larger boat. And I guess they proceeded to cut her up. And she kept saying, "I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch what they're doing to my body." So we moved her away from that. But one of the reasons this woman had come to see me was she had been having back problems for a long time. And it was causing numbness down her arms and into her hands, to where it was difficult to sleep at night and sometimes hard to do her work because it made it hard to handle things and grasp things because the numbness in the hands and the arms. So the reason, when I get to subconscious and it tells me the reasons for these lives, they showed her this, was as this whale, when they began cutting on it, they cut it down the spine. And she was still alive when they did that. The whale was not dead at that time. So she brought forward the trauma of seeing this happen down the spine and was carrying that with her into this present lifetime. I've had many other people who have had back problems, and usually it would be caused from a fall. There are just so many, many ways that you could injure your back in other lives. A fall, a war, many different things. This was the first time I had it going back to a life as an animal and carrying over this far into this present lifetime of being the watching them cut down the spine. Well, in my work then, we set about to cure the problem, heal the problem. The subconscious says that now that she knew what caused it, it could go away because it was unnecessary. So it took away, and she wasn't going to have any problems with it anymore. Because what's the use of having the problem once you have found out what's causing it? To find out what causes it, it goes away because it's totally unnecessary. This is how much the mind controls the body. But I've had others who have gone to see creatures. Many of them have been like dolphin-like creatures, and they really enjoyed that. One man, he didn't know what he was in the beginning because he kept saying, "I see everything blurry." And he figured out what it was. First he said it was dark, and then he was beginning to see light, and it was like blurry. Then it dawned on him. He said, "I'm underneath the water." He said, "Have you ever been under the water looking up and watching the sun shine through the water?" And I said, "I've never done it, but I can kind of visualize what it would be like," because he said it was like looking at a ripple effect as the sun shone through the water. And he said, "I'm floating now on top of the water." He said, "I've been asleep," and he was floating on his back. And out of the one eye, it was dark on this one side, but it was night. And on the other eye, he could see the sun coming up.